Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/spookshow. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player.
It has been established that persons who have recently died have been returning to life and committing acts of murder.
Have you checked the children?
I want to play a game. The box. You opened it. We came.
Here.
This is the All-American Spookshow.
Hello and welcome to yet another edition of the All-American Spookshow Horror Podcast. I'm Josh. I'm joined here with Will.
What's up?
Donnie.
Hey.
And the Professor Smoke.
What's up?
And we start the next 100 episodes, I guess, here, episode 101. And we're beginning a new, I guess, tradition, format, however you want to call it, whatever, however you want to frame it. We're basically, every other week when we do our normal horror movie reviews, instead of putting them up for a poll or just kind of like this group decision where we kind of debate a few movies back and forth, we're basically going to leave it up to each member of the Spook Show to choose one movie at random. Just the only criteria basically is obviously a horror movie. It sticks to our we always do a newer movie, older movie, back and forth, rotational kind of thing. So we stick to that, and we did it by basically like pick a name out of the hat for the order. So we start today with Will's choice, and it's an older movie. So Will, what have you decided that we're going to be talking about this week? And just in case the listeners didn't find out the last episode.
George Romero's Night of the Living Dead.
From 1968. When I looked this up to watch it, just to kind of get it out on Front Street, dude, it's on like 100 different streaming services. There's no excuse to not find this somewhere. I think it's on like almost every major service outside of maybe Netflix. Like almost every other one has it, even some we've never heard of, and of course on YouTube and everywhere. So you can easily find a copy of Night of the Living Dead to watch. So I'll go ahead and get this out too, since we're usually kind of bad sometimes, or I am bad sometimes about letting everyone know. We are a spoiler-filled podcast, so if you haven't watched Night of the Living Dead, I highly recommend going, hitting pause now, go out and find it on 1,000 different streaming services, or if you've got it on VHS, DVD, whatever, go sit down and watch it. Then come back and listen to the rest of this, so we don't spoil the movie for you. But because there is the remake version, right, Smoked? I think that Tom Savini did like in 90, 91, something like that.
Yeah, 1990. Yeah, there's the Night of the Living Dead 1990 as it used to be known as, but now I just guess they just call it Night of the Living Dead.
So don't get it confused with that one. We're watching the original George Romero classic from 1968, Night of the Living Dead. So I guess before we dive into the background and then get into the roundtable discussion about this film, we'll go ahead and toss the trailer for Night of the Living Dead.
Welcome to a night of total terror. Night of the living dead, the dead who live on living flesh, the dead whose haunted souls hunt the living whose bodies are the only food for these ungodly creatures. Night of the Living Dead. A bizarre adventure in fear. An experience in shock, more shattering than your strangest nightmare. Night of the Living Dead. A night with the dead who cannot die. A night of total terror. Night of the living dead.
All right, there you have it. So I guess we'll go ahead and take the little bit of a dive into the background information here. Now the interesting thing is how this has so many different titles. There was that I could find. There was one title that was basically just kind of like, yeah, this is before I think they had even started doing anything. It was titled other than just the pre-production stuff, the writing of the script, screenplay, and all that stuff. It was called Monster Flick. But then as soon as they started production, they called it Night of the Flesh Eaters. Then apparently around the same time, there was another film that was being made. I think it was just straight up called Flesh Eaters or something. So since they were kind of a small crew, a crew that was kind of getting into the business with this movie, they didn't really feel like going through any lawsuits or anything like that. So that right there on the spot, they're like, all right, well, let's just call it something that this isn't going to be the permanent name, but it'll be a good working title. So they called it Night of Anubis. So actually on my Criterion Collection Blu-ray that I have, there is it's basically a work reel version of the movie. It's just called Night of Anubis, and I think it's like a 20 or 30 minute cut of the movie that basically they would have shown to kind of like, here's what the movie's going to kind of look like, feel like, and everything. But that's on there, which I didn't get a chance to sit down and watch it, but I did watch a little bit of the background stuff on there, and it was, it'd be pretty cool to sit down and watch that. But then eventually they finally landed on, obviously, Night of the Living Dead. Did you guys find out anything interesting about any of that stuff before we move on, like as far as the copyright stuff and all that kind of thing before we move into the other information?
Yeah, I did. As far as, Romero, he didn't really see much profit from the film. He didn't know a whole lot about distribution rights. So even though the film made well over budget, obviously it was one of the most successful independent films of all time, he didn't really make much money off of it. But yeah, there was something about and you had actually just mentioned it, the copyright went, it was in the public domain. I think it was just before the MPAA rating system was, let's see, it was the MPAA
was a month
rating
later or something like that, wasn't it? Or
yeah, it was about a month later. Yep. But yeah, we actually covered the MPAA rating system on, I think it was episode number 32 in our archives. But yeah, this was one of the last films that was released in the U.S. That did not have a rating.
Yeah, so
and I think what I'd seen was also like they were still planning to go with Night of the Flesh Eaters, and I believe it was something along the lines of they didn't want people to get confused, thinking they were seeing like a sequel to that. So that's when they changed it over to Night of the Living Dead. And I think what happened was they just forgot to put the copyright in on it at the beginning or at the end when they had to change the name, which is one heck of a mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By what I can count, whatever. By what I can count, it's about damn near a $30 million plus mistake. Because from what I could find, the budget was somewhere between $114,000 and $125,000, and box office it grossed roughly $30 million. So yeah, that's and God knows how much they've made off of what would have been made off of VHS and DVD and Blu-rays and all the various formats in the time since. Millions of dollars in that one simple mistake.
That kind of leads into a little bit into you mentioned about the remake. One of the reasons, besides just doing a remake of it, that they did that movie is so that they could get the name copyrighted again.
Yeah.
So that kind of benefited them when they came out with the remake. It did allow them to have a copyright on Night of the Living Dead. And I don't know about the going forward from that point as far as home video releases. Whether I'm sure these new Blu-rays and everything, at some point that copyright, whether it was from the remake that helped him out ongoing from the rest of the home releases and theatrical showings of it or whatever, they very well could have. But I just talking about the VHS releases alone, that was the first. Well, besides, I think I've done it on the Library of the Professor, but the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Betamax was like the first actual home video movie I ever owned. But that was because we had a Betamax and they, VHS had come in and took over it and pushed it out, and some of the video stores were selling their stock for cheap. But when it comes to VHS, that was the first VHS I ever owned, was Night of the Living Dead. and that's because anybody literally could release that movie because of that copyright issue. It didn't matter. And some hideous quality copies of it that you could find on VHS.
I thought one of the more interesting things with this movie is, like usually, all right, let's do post-production. Now we got to do, like marketing and, kind of drum this thing up is, what most movies do now. From what I saw, like as soon as they got done editing it, like that night, Romero like threw the film into his car, and him and somebody else drove to New York.
Yeah.
And tried to get it in movie houses that night.
Wow. Yeah, you don't hear about that kind of thing going on anymore. That's like we said, you heard the budget there, very small budget. And a lot of the people that were in it, not donated, but, threw in on this. I think they said basically about 10 of the people that were behind the scenes threw in about $600, which raised them about $6,000. And then eventually, this ain't enough. So they had to, find other investments that got it up to even to the amount that they were able to, get there that I talked about. But this was all filmed basically in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area, Evans City Cemetery, various places around that general area, a little bit in Washington, D.C., when I guess they were talking about, like, when they had, like, the scenes on TV of the military guys and all that, they actually went to D.C. and shot some of that stuff. Principal photography, it seems like it must have been sometime in late 67, early 68. I could never find, like, a specific date of when they filmed this, but it had to have been around that time period. Like, it actually premiered October 1st, 1968 in Pittsburgh. So I'm going to assume that was probably a drive-in maybe or something there in Pittsburgh.
I think this was one of the last big drive-in movie.
Yeah, I read that as well.
But it released wide just 3 days later on October 4th, 1968. So then it was released upon the masses, and it's had, plenty of different releases over the years and in different places since then. I mean, just as recently as August of 2020, it finally debuted in Poland at the Octopus Film Festival. So I guess every couple of years or so it's released somewhere, throughout the world. But it is not rated, like you said, the MPAA, that whole deal. It has a total runtime of 1 hour and 36 minutes, but I feel like it's obviously that's the general runtime of most films, but it's a pretty quick hour and 36 in my opinion.
Yeah. It has a really good pacing.
Yeah.
You don't feel like it drags at all.
No, almost non-existent. Like, there are a few moments in there, but they're very brief, and it keeps moving. So, it doesn't drag you down at all.
I definitely feel like a lot of movie makers now could take a lot of lessons just from that portion of this movie.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's very...
from the pacing and editing, definitely good.
Yeah. It, of course, is directed by Georgie Romero, and he was, one of the writers. We're going to take a deep dive on the career of George Romero next week on episode 102. So we're not going to spend a lot of time today talking about him, but I mean, I'm sure anybody listening to this knows Georgie Romero and the work that he's done. So we'll take the deeper dive on his background and his career and everything next week. But he was, like I said, he's directed it. He was one of the screenplay writers along with John A. Russo. Now we spoke about him before, right? There was one little movie we did way back in the day, I think, that he had a hand in, Smoke.
I don't know. Did we do one? I mean, I know we've talked about him recently. I did a Library of the Professor on the movie Midnight, which he directed.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did we do an actual movie that he had a hand in though?
Yeah.
I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, it was a little unknown film called The Return of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
That's one.
Yep.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. That would have to think about it being Russo anymore, because I do have the novel that he wrote, Return of the Living Dead, but they basically bought that novel from him, I guess, and made this movie that's totally not at all what was in the novel, which is a good thing, because it's much better than what was in the novel anyway. So.
Yeah. But we did talk about him at the time because, he's listed as one of the writers on that movie. And same thing as like Russell Streiner, the guy that played the brother in this film, Johnny. He had a hand in that as well, and he was also one of the producers on this one. So he is his name has come up a time or two, and I'm sure it won't be the last time for him. But yeah, he played a big part in that, and like I said, he was a producer. The cast, we've got the main, I guess the two main members of the cast were Dwayne Jones, who played the part as Ben, and then Judith O'Dea, who played the part of Barbara. We've got the Coopers. Harry Cooper was played by Carl Hardman. Then Helen Cooper was played by Marilyn Eastman. And then you had the younger couple. I guess they kind of played teenage, right? Like late teens, early 20s couple, Tom and Judy. Tom was played by Keith Wayne, and Judy was played by Judith Ridley. The Cooper's little girl, Karen, she was played by Kara Shawn. Really, I mean, like that's as far as like the principal cast. That's about the only ones you really would want to bring up. I think Romero was actually one of the reporters or something in this, right? If I remember correctly.
Outside the Washington D.C. scene, he played one of the reporters.
Yeah. Really, I mean, like, there's not a lot that you can deep dive into any of these cast members, really, because not a lot of them went on to do a lot of things, after this. I mean, even like Marilyn Eastman she only had four film credits. Judith O'Dea, basically, who played Barbara, she basically has kind of vanished from the business. She did one movie, and it was a television movie 10 years after this movie, and then nothing else till 2003. She's been far more active since 2003 than she was in the previous, 40-something years before that. So I guess she's kind of had a little bit of a film acting career renaissance, but not much else to mention, really. I mean, even Dwayne Jones only had 8 acting credits. But that being said, I thought everybody did a pretty good job in this movie of playing their roles. The only one that sticks out that wasn't all that great to me was the younger kid, Tom. You could tell his role was stiff as a board, man. Like he wasn't used to doing it, and you could tell. It didn't. But very wooden. But I think everyone else did a great job. So, did you guys have anything else you wanted to point out before we dive into the movie itself? I mean, that's I'm sure there's a lot of little tidbits that I'm leaving off the table here.
I did read where one of the Walter Reed organization's publicity stunts for marketing this movie was that there was a $50,000 insurance policy against anyone that died from a heart attack while watching the movie. I thought that was pretty cool.
I think we've mentioned that before.
That's pre-70s. That's kind of funny.
Yeah. I think we've mentioned that before about how in the 60s and 70s, well, I guess maybe in the 50s too, but they always had these gimmicks, right, Smoke, of this kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of draw more people into the theater or into the drive-in or whatever. Sometimes I know for drive-in movies they'd have people in suits, monster suits running around.
Yeah, scaring the shit out of people.
Popping up into people's car windows or whatever, and they would advertise this too. So I kind of wish I had grown up a little bit, had been born a little bit earlier into that era, just because, or that somebody would really revive that shit these days.
Yeah, they'd hand out barf bags or something when you go into the movie, or make you sign a quote unquote waiver to come watch the movie or something. That way, if you fall over dead, it's not our fault.
These special glasses, it wasn't 3D; it was like Shaco-Vision, and it would be like basically those prism type glasses that makes everything all rainbow light colors or whatever.
I think not come to think of it, I think we talked about that give or take about a year ago when we did the episode Popcorn, because remember that movie is kind of full of all those kind of gimmicks, except
it's kind of a nod to William Castle, right, who did all those types of things that people will. If you don't know William Castle, you probably know the remakes of 13 Ghosts and House on Haunted Hill and all that stuff. But the original is where he would do that type of putting shock buzzers on the bottoms of some of the seats, just the way they did in the Popcorn movie,
Yeah. Yeah, except in that movie, it was like all these pranks rolled into one and then dialed up to 11. It was like, it didn't just rumble the seat or something. It literally fried somebody to death and stuff like that.
Entertainment Weekly has this listed as their 13th scariest movie of all time.
Well, I mean, I can't argue with it. I mean, obviously, you've seen a lot of things in the years since that would kind of desensitize you to the type of horror that you saw here. But in 1968, this probably would scare the shit out of you. There wasn't a lot quite yet, I don't think, that I recall that would have come out. I mean, I'm sure there's a handful, right, Smoke, but not a lot that probably would have, if you saw this, would have probably scared you the way this one would have.
Yeah, I mean, there was gore, but not even that much gore. It was Herschel Gordon Lewis type gore, which was very campy, not taking itself too seriously. I mean, that was shocking to people, I guess, seeing that level of gore. But as far as I can tell, there wasn't too many movies like Night of the Living Dead that came with a little bit more of that type of gore, but also with the scare factor to go with it. Right now, off the top of my head, that combines some of the brutality of the gore with the ratcheting up the tension and and the creepiness and whatnot. Maybe Carnival of Souls, which didn't have gore, but it was one of the movies that influenced Night of the Living Dead, and it was rather eerie and scary and had its moments like that, but it didn't have the gore.
This and to what you kind of said there, this was definitely a highly influential film. I mean, you could say this is what turned zombie movies into what we know and film or and shows and stuff like Walking Dead and a lot of the zombie movies and stuff that have come out in the years since. this is the one that started that, right? Like, there weren't, and it's almost like they set the ground rules in this thing, like verbatim. Like, all right, well, you shoot the thing in the head, it dies. If you get bit, you turn into one. All that stuff comes from here, right?
Yeah, if you any of that, like any kind of zombie lore that people know today came from this movie, because before this movie it was all voodoo zombies, the typical traditional Haitian, setting of like White Zombie or I Walked with a Zombie, where they're using these zombies to perform some duty or whatever, right? And they didn't eat people. This was the first movie that had cannibalistic zombies. And like you said, the first movie that had like the rules of zombies where you like shoot them in the head and they die, or you get bit and you turn into one, or what, everything that we know today about the modern zombie movie came from this.
Yeah. Like there was nothing that came out that set these type of rules. And it's literally like they're setting the rules. Like they would list them off. Like, throughout the movie you learn these things, like you're kind of learning the rules as they go along and they're explaining it to you.
The other thing, it was one of those movies where Romero never cared about really setting forth why the zombie apocalypse happened. There's a little bit of that talk in Washington about a meteor or comet or whatever, a little bit, but not really. They just kind of throw it out there. Maybe that's it or whatever. But he never really didn't care about explaining why this is happening, which is the same thing they took for like Walking Dead and all these other, a lot of the other zombie movies. It's just you're usually plopped right into the middle of something that's going on, or either right at the beginning of it or near the end of it, depending on whatever, wherever they want it, whatever the zombie movie is that wants to set their time period in. Usually you don't get a real explanation, because it would kind of, I don't know, take away from the movie if they were to explain it too much, I guess.
It's time to refresh. For your convenience, we have an attractive refreshment stand with a parade of items to tempt your taste. Hot buttered popcorn, golden good and fresh from the popper. Your favorite candies, wholesome and rich and full of flavor. Ice cream and other good things to eat. Plus, ice-cold Coca-Cola. So bright, so bracing, with a taste and tingle all its own.
For you, the listeners of the All-American Spook Show Horror Podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. So I go over to Audible and I just typed in Night of the Living Dead to see what would pop up, and sure enough, right off the top, Night of the Living Dead by John Russo, narrated by Michael Reeves. That one is almost 5 hours long, so that is there. Let's see, we've got Night of the Living Dead Dramatized by John Russo, Georgie Romero, narrated by full cast. That one's only about 55 minutes long, so a little less than an hour to do the dramatization, the audio dramatization of it, than it was the hour and a half long movie. And let's see, Nights of the Living Dead, an anthology by various authors. That one is almost 12 hours long. So, and there's a few more versions of, I think, Night of the Living Dead, maybe narrated by other people and stuff like that. And there's another one here I just saw, The Living Dead by Georgie Romero, Daniel Krauss. That one's over 27 hours long. So it says a new novel on it, so I'm not sure exactly. I mean, it's Romero, so I'm assuming it's tied into this. I don't really know anything about that one, but it sounds interesting. So if any of those tickle your fancy, go head over to audibletrial.com/spookshow. Again, that's audibletrial.com/spookshow for your free audio book. So I guess we'll go into the old, not necessarily blow by blow, but just kind of explain the movie real fast, and then we can kind of get into our little roundtable discussion about the movie and what our thoughts were on it and all that. Siblings Barbara and Johnny drive to a cemetery to visit their father's grave. As they're there, this dude rolls up on them, and he's like got like a messed up suit, and then the dude basically kills Johnny, and or he attacks Barbara and then kills Johnny. Barbara's trying to get away in the car, rolls down a hill. She jumps out of the car, and then she finds this farmhouse, I guess like down the hill a little ways away, and she hides in there. She finds the dead body of a woman, I guess the person that lived there, and her face is like eaten off. And of course, like now there's more and more of them kind of surrounding the house. And then all of a sudden, a guy named Ben arrives, and he kind of helps secure the farmhouse by boarding up the windows and doors and everything. And he finds a rifle, so they think they're all sitting there. But meanwhile, she's like shell shock. Like. She's basically out of it because of everything she just saw. Then just after like he boards up all the windows and everything, all of a sudden 5 people appear that have been hiding out in the damn in the cellar this whole time. They just randomly appear like, hey, what the hell? I've been beating and banging up here. Yeah, we had no idea what was going on, We had no way of knowing. But basically, there's an older or a middle-aged couple down there that have a young daughter. She is sick. They don't know why, but they had been attacked. And then there's a younger couple, Tom and Judy, that's down in the cellar. So basically, they come up, and they all kind of decide, like, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make some Molotov cocktails. You're going to throw them down from the upstairs. The fire distracts they don't call them, I don't think, I could be wrong, maybe you guys heard it and I didn't. I don't think they ever call them zombies, right? They just call them ghouls in this film, right?
Yeah, they never mentioned zombies one time in this movie.
Yeah, they say those things.
Yeah, never in any Romero movie either. He was against. He explicitly said he didn't want to call them zombies. And there's not a or a movie where the word zombie pops up.
And I'm sure we can get into a little bit of that discussion here in just a minute once we get through the explanation of this movie. But they eventually find a TV, and of course they're listening to radio reports and everything. So that's where you get a lot of the exposition in the film is through these TV and radio reports of like what's going on outside of this house. What caused this, what's happening, how do you deal with it? Is kind of explained throughout the entire movie. But basically, this is where they find out that the ghouls, we'll call them that, can be stopped with like a bullet to the head or a heavy blow to the head or whatever, or just straight up by being burned. And that's where, like I said, they come to the conclusion that fire, scares them off. So they decide to throw the Molotov cocktails down from the top, and then that allows Ben and Tom to run out to get to the truck that is out there that Ben rode to the farmhouse in, because there's a gas pump over by the farmhouse. They need to get the truck over there so they can fill it up with gas. So as they go across, it's like a series of unfortunate events unfolds. they can't do this smoothly at all, because
what they should never do is have a torch around a gas pump,
Or if you can't get the gas pump unlocked, you shouldn't shoot at it. But both of these things happen in the course of this shit. Meanwhile, Judy, Tom's girlfriend, had run out and they told her to stay in the house, but she's like, no, I'm with you. So, she's in the fucking way. But they get into the truck. They manage to get it over to the gas pump. They basically, they shoot at the damn gas pump to unlock it. Luckily, that didn't blow up. He grabs it, and he's just like, oh, gas! And he just, throws gas all over the damn place. That catches fire, and oh, shit, we got to get away from the gas pump. So he's driving the on-fire truck, and then Judy can't get out of the truck. She's like, my coat is stuck or whatever, and then boom, the truck blows up. So Tom and Judy are gone. Ben's like, what the fuck? So now I got to get back to the house. Of course, he gets back to the house, and the guy, the middle-aged guy, Cooper, won't let him back into the house. Now, I should say, up to this point, there's been this whole back-and-forth thing where they clearly, this guy wants to be in charge, but Ben is in charge. They got this little, back-and-forth going on. So, as soon as Ben gets up to the house, he won't let him in, but he eventually kicks the door in. He just starts beating the shit out of him. I think at that point, didn't he shoot him? Didn't he punch him 3 or 4 times and then he shot him? I think that's where it happened. But either way, eventually, that's where, eventually Ben shoots him. Cooper goes down to the cellar where his wife and daughter are. No, his wife is upstairs. Yeah, she's upstairs at this point because she's up there helping to fend off the ghouls. And their daughter at this point has died, and now she starts basically eating her dad once he goes down there, right? Yeah. Once he goes down to the cellar, basically she's done died and come back to life as a ghoul. She starts eating him. The mom comes down, and then the girl picks up a garden spade or something and just stabs.
Like a trowel or something.
Yeah, trowel. Yeah, and stabs the mom to death. So then, meanwhile, as the mom is getting away from the ghouls, Barbara goes over to help her as she gets away, and then the door opens up, and then one of the ghouls is her brother Johnny, and she's just Johnny, and then the ghoul just basically just grabs her and walks away into the crowd of zombies. The end. So Barbara's gone. So basically now Ben is the only one left. He goes down to the cellar and finds Mr. Cooper, dead, and being eaten by his daughter. So he just she comes upstairs. Yeah. The daughter comes upstairs after basically killing her parents, right? Mm-hmm. Ben locks the door or whatever, goes down. Cooper's dead. he sits up and he kills him again. But Ben killed this motherfucker twice.
Oh yeah. Also, it's probably worth noting here, though, which is what this, they had the schism going the whole time, and the whole time, like Ben's saying, the cellar is the safest place, and and then no, I'm not going to lock myself in the cellar. Ironically enough, it turns out that this was the safest place.
Yeah. So all this for nothing.
Yeah.
Or was it, right? As you're about to find out here at the bitter end. But then Mrs. Cooper, she comes back to life, and he has to put her down. So now he just basically hangs out there the rest of the night. Next morning, what you keep seeing on the television throughout the entire movie is that there's this roving band of it's not really like a lynch party.
Like a militia?
Yeah, I guess it's just a group of guys that have guns and shit. They've got together and they're just kind of going through the countryside, killing the ghouls and burning them and everything. They roll up. Ben hears all this. He hears them shooting and hears them yelling outside. He comes up. And for some reason, he didn't say anything or anything like, hey, I'm alive or nothing. He just like gets into the window and picks his gun up like he's going to shoot him, right? And then one of the guys like, yep, shoot him right between the eyes. Pow! Ben goes down. He's dead. And then like in the credits, you see them like in pictures throughout the credits, like picking Ben up with like the, what do they call those hooks? Like the meat hooks, I guess, kind of.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Like log grabbers or whatever.
Something. They grab a hold of them and like throw them in the fire with the rest of the ghouls. That's the way it ends. It's like a big pile of bodies being burned. Literally like the end. That's it. Go to black. Yep. So there you have it. George Romero's 1968 cult classic, Night of the Living Dead. Will, since this was your choice, we'll start with you. You got any questions, comments, anything you want to throw out on the floor to begin?
Man, this movie, like the ending, I'm sure that's the way it would go. Just life sucks and that's the way it is. Man, for a movie, it was very anticlimactic.
Yeah. Well, you expect things to be all right for at least one of them, right? Like Ben, Barbara, one of those, because pretty much, well, the younger couple wasn't too much. They were helpful and they weren't assholes like the Coopers were, but you expect somebody to come out of this. Like somebody's going to survive.
Yeah, this is one of the first movies that I think I read that didn't have the traditional Hollywood ending.
No, it went the total opposite way. It's dire as hell. That's all I can ever think of when I think about it. It's just fucking dark, man. It's like shit.
Yeah, bleak. The way it builds is just bleak from beginning to end. Basically, I mean, there's no let up. There's a moment, you got Barbara gets there, and then Ben shows up, so you think, oh, good, at least he's not gonna, got him. And there's two of them now, Then they come up from the basement, and then there's some more, but then they turn out to be assholes.
Yeah.
And all these keep like compiling, and you think by the time you get to the end, it's like, yes, okay, Ben survived. He's gonna make it through. Here's this party coming in. They're like, okay, they're gonna rescue him and get him out of there, and then all of a sudden, bam.
Yeah.
And you're like, what?
Oh fuck.
Well, very well done, I'd have to say. I mean, it's something you don't expect at all to happen the first time you've seen that movie.
No. Like I said, what you expect to see is like, fuck, he made it through the night. He comes up, the cavalry comes in, so to speak, and he's all right, No, you don't. You get the total opposite. Now, there is the whole, George Romero never really shied away from like social issues and stuff like that, and like all of his movies kind of have some kind of allegory or whatever the phrasing is for like things that were going on in real life, right? So like, this obviously is like right in the heat of the civil rights movement and everything. Yep. So that had to have been a big deal. Not only the lead being a black man, but the kind of the co-lead being a woman, a white woman. So these were all like, they had to have been like hot button issues, so to speak, back in 1968, right?
You would think so. I mean, they were, and you would think so. But every interview you ever see with Romero, he always mentions that. No, I wasn't doing that intentionally, and I picked him because he was the best actor for the role. But it's got to tie in. It's got to play in some way in there, regardless of how much you deny that these things were going on. I mean, well, maybe not consciously. Maybe it was a subconscious decision because of issues and everything going on as to why it chose or whatever, and what the storyline was and the whole thing. But I mean, according to Romero, though, he always said, no, it wasn't. I didn't do anything intentionally. It was sort of it just happened that way. I don't know if I know.
To kind of build off of that was I also read that originally the lead male character was actually supposed to be a white truck driver, and when when they were auditioning, that guy came in and just kind of blew them away. So he just kind of had to rewrite it as they did it.
Yeah, because like even though this is a black man in the lead role, and he takes charge, right? He's kind of in charge of the group or anything. None of those things are ever. They're not talked about in the movie. It's just he's the guy. He's the lead guy. He's in charge. Yeah, like they never go into that. So that kind of does lend to what you were saying about Romero not doing that on purpose. Like it's just, because you would think if he's doing it on purpose, he'd be like, there would have been something in there, like, well, I'm not going to listen to a black man or something, from the guy Cooper, right? Yeah. Who clearly just feels like he's a racist, but they never say that. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just kind of there, but you have there's a feeling of it being there.
Something I was thinking about, you think about how times have changed and everything, if you guys have kids and such, but you think about if your kid watches this today, and they see the first ghoul just kind of burn through the phone lines, just kind of ran through the phone lines. Kids won't understand like how much of a disaster that would have been.
Yeah,
because they tried to use the phone, and you just can't use the phone.
Yeah, well, why not? What's a line have to do with it?
Yeah, exactly. It's that type of I guess just the age of the work.
It's just a snapshot of a moment in time, and that like the only way they had to communicate was obviously they had a phone, but the phone was out basically from the get-go. They found a radio and they're like, oh, thank God we can at least listen to what's going on. And then eventually they found a TV, and like now they're all crowded around the TV. Now, obviously it would be the same today, right, if something like this was happening, but still TV was still relatively new at this time, right? Like it's not like everyone in the world would have had a television like they do now. Even then, most people probably had TVs, but it probably still wasn't as prevalent as it is now.
Yeah, and TVs were probably out 15 years by this point.
And give or take, I think it was sometime in the 40s, right, when televisions became like a thing where normal folks would have had them. So most people probably would have had them, but not everybody.
I would lend to the fact that let's see, maybe I want to say it was probably the mid 50s. The only reason I say that is because of Back to the Future.
My only frame of reference is Back to the Future. Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure televisions became a thing late 40s, early 50s. But yeah, you're right. They're probably every other house in the neighborhood would have had one definitely by the mid to late 50s. So even by this point, it still would have been somewhat, I ain't going to say rare, but it wouldn't have been common to have a television. So, but yeah, those are your only ways of getting any kind of communication back then. There's no cell phones, there's no internet. Nothing like that. So, if somebody cut the phone line, like you said, you're just fucked. This was the way, children.
Something else I also noticed, like in the opening credits, Johnny takes off his driving gloves. That's something you never really see anymore.
No.
Like, I mean, that's more of a, way back when thing.
That feels more to me like, way back when, or if you have a really nice car. Like, if you drive, like, I don't know, an Aston Martin or something like that, just a fine vehicle, fine luxury vehicle. Maybe still today you wear driving gloves or some, chauffeur or something like that. But that's pretty much it, right? Like, doesn't go beyond that.
Now you're not going to get out of your Pinto with it and pull them off, right? I doubt.
Yeah, no.
If you even get out of that Pinto.
I remember, Donnie, you and I both, we worked at a car wash back in the day. And every once in a while, you'd get into a car like that, like something really nice, like better than especially the piece of shit cars we had back then. Like I had a Peugeot station wagon, and you had like an old Nissan or something like that.
Yeah.
And like you're not wearing driving gloves in a car like that, but every once in a while in this car wash, you would all of a sudden like something like fucking this is damn near if not a $100,000 vehicle just rolled up, and you're just like, oh, where are the driving gloves? You barely wanted to like. Touch it just to pull it down to wash, to finish drying it off or whatever. Those were the days, kids. Don't work in a car wash.
Yeah,
you don't
tear up the shoulders.
And you don't make any fucking money. Wouldn't recommend it.
Mm-mm.
So yeah, I mean, why are so many of the zombies naked? Or not zombies. I'm sorry, heaven forbid, ghouls. Why? Well, I mean, like, if you just
Well,
die,
you start running a temperature, you're still alive. God, it's hot in here. I'm gonna take that shirt off.
Yeah.
Ooh, getting a little campy downstairs. Let's take the bottoms off.
Ooh, these pants are chafing me. Now I'm a ghoul. I could understand like people dying in various ways, or they get attacked or whatever, and they become a ghoul, butt naked. I don't know. Especially since they don't really set up the premise of these things are coming out of the ground or anything like. Not that you're buried naked, but you get what I'm saying. Like that might make some level of sense. But yeah, I was just, and it seemed like they multiplied too. Like yeah, the ghouls multiply. There's more. It starts off with 3 or 4, and all of a sudden there's like 40 out there. But like, it seems like every time they cut to the ghouls outside, there's more naked people. Are they just ripping each other's clothes off? What the fuck is going on here?
Ghouls are DTF. What can I say?
Yeah. And there's many subtle levels of makeup too. Like some of them really, like you could tell they put some makeup work in to make them look like something happened to them. Then others are just here's just an old dude naked, no makeup. He's a ghoul.
There's Batwing.
That's where the budget really shines too, right? That didn't have any budget is on the ghouls. I know, over time all these things, the idea of it became more and more, and special effects, blah blah blah. But at this point, yeah, they did not put their money there. That's for sure. In special effects, probably most of their money was just in destroying that house and burning cars or something, right?
Yeah, I believe I read like that house was actually an abandoned house, and they went through and kind of built the house back up because like the owner, I guess, the farm that it was on was actually going to demolish it. And it was just like, here, we'll take care of that for you.
Yeah. That's kind of like these days, like, well, I guess they probably did it back then too. Like they're going to tear this house down. No, don't do that. Let the fire department practice on this house, so they'll just set it on fire. Yeah, that's the way you'd want to do it if you were trying to do a movie on a budget. Like, oh, you're going to rip this down anyways? Yeah, can we do it? Cool, all right. Save you the trouble, gives us a movie.
Now, something that would have been really interesting is the original premise of what eventually became this.
Mm-hmm.
What I read, the original premise for this movie was actually an alien movie. Where aliens come down to Earth, and it was kind of like almost like a American Graffiti type thing, where it was supposed to be aliens and teenage kids riding around in hot rods. It was like, from what I heard, was like the original premise of the movie. And as things kind of evolve, and they realize this is going to be way too much money, because I mean, Romero, I believe Josh, you told me this was like before he started this, like he was making commercials, right?
Yeah, I think that he had done that. Yeah.
Yeah. So like this is him kind of branching out. So yeah, this would have been an odd movie and probably dramatically less memorable.
Yeah.
I was about to
say interesting. Yes. Something we would be talking about today, probably not. Especially back then, where I know that sounds like an outrageous premise. There were probably other movies that were similar to that premise that had already come out, especially throughout the 50s and early 60s, where horror, I wouldn't say it was dead, but it was definitely not as prevalent anymore. And a lot of these type of movies, there was a lot more sci-fi elements in your horror and stuff like that back then. So, yeah, as kooky as it sounds, there probably was some movie already made that sounded similar to that, So, yeah, going this direction was the right way to go, for sure. But, yeah, the dark ending, I mean, like, what more can you say about that? Just a fucking dour, down and out, fucking depressing ending of this movie. That's another question I guess you could throw out there, like as far as like how you said the framing of it, if they've done it a different way or whatever, the ending. What if he had survived, Ben or someone else? How would you feel about the ending of that? Would you be any better about it? Would you be like, it's perfect just the way it is? I mean, what do you think?
Honestly, man, you know what? You think about, this is what I thought. And the only reason this is gonna sound fucked up. But
that's what we're here for.
Go on.
Yeah. Well, no. Honestly, and this is what I was thinking the first time I watched it, which has been a number of years ago. But I was thinking that they were going to kill him anyway.
Yeah,
like even if he had walked out,
if he comes out like with his hands up, like, "Hey, I'm here. I'm alive. Get him!" Pow, pow, pow.
Yeah. Because I mean, it's not. Yeah, like we know it was shot in PA. But it's not really mentioned, during the
Well, now that I don't know because there is the
You know what? Yeah,
when
they
they're
do
naming off
mention it
the
on the
cities
radio.
and stuff. Yeah, well, I don't know if they ever said Pittsburgh or Pennsylvania, but like when they're listing off those cities and stuff, even if you didn't know that, you'd probably hey, wait a minute, those are towns in Pennsylvania, I would imagine. So yeah.
But that's
either way,
that's part of the reason why I think they probably would have killed him anyway.
Yeah.
And that sounds super fucked up, but
that's kind of
and honestly, it kind of holds up to today. Just all the craziness going on.
Yeah, whether they were purposeful or not, these themes and these comparisons, however you want to phrase it, that they wrote into this movie and he put into this movie, yeah, they are, like I said, purposeful or not, they're there. They make you think about these things, whether it was meant to think for you to think that way or not. I think they were. I think there was, and and he was being kind of coy and no, I didn't do that on purpose. Wink, wink. Like that's what I think. But because he was a crafty dude, so and he's made other movies that kind of had these same themes and comparisons too. So that's why I think, it was there on purpose. But yeah, you're right. Like unfortunately, these are things that still are talked about and still exist, unfortunately, and that's just the world we live in. And all we can do is, make our own little corners better and, not think that way. But these things make you think that way. That's for sure. It's there. There's no doubt about that. And you don't, I know we rarely get too heavy on this podcast, but this is the kind of movie where it makes you think about it. So it has to be discussed. You can't just ignore it because it's there. All right. So now that we're going to close up the book on Night of the Living Dead and move forward. But before we do that, let's get to our usual little bits. Donnie?
Connections from the crypt.
I'm gonna add more ha ha ha's to the end of it. So like it just keeps going for 5 minutes, and then y'all are eventually like, "What the fuck is going on here?"
This is basically where we, if you're just joining us for this episode, this is where we connect the current movies episode to any cast or crew from previous episodes. So we do have a couple of connections on the crew side. George Romero also did Creepshow, which we covered in our archives as well. And we also mentioned John A. Russo, writer for The Return of the Living Dead, which was one of our earlier episodes. On the cast side, Russell Streiner, who played Johnny, was actually the writer or one of the writers for The Return of the Living Dead. Mm-hmm. So that's our connections to past Spookshow episodes.
All right, Will, we'll toss to you.
Okay, so I came up with 8 in this one. We've got Johnny, who got cracked in the head right off the top. Tom and Judy, who got burnt to death in the truck that exploded. Harry got shot in the gut by Ben. Karen was bit by Helen, who eventually succumbed to her bite from before the movie started. Barbara got eaten by the zombies when she went after her brother, and then Ben got shot in the head right there at the end of the movie.
And that's not including the God knows untold others, the ghouls, whatever, right? Like,
yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and count those as dead and move on.
Yeah, because otherwise it could just be 100,000. Who knows?
Pre-dead.
Yeah.
It could be infinite.
All right, 8 sounds like good. So, Smoke, that naturally leads us to you.
Gore score.
Now, this one was, like we mentioned before the time, it was pretty gory. I mean, you only had Herschel Gordon Lewis movies to really compare it to. And it's not nearly as gory as it would get come Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead. Because they worked with what they had at the time. And Savini hadn't even come into the picture yet. I think he was still in Vietnam at the time. Actually, that's another thing we didn't really get to yet, that they knew each other because, Savini was from Pittsburgh as well. And he would have wanted to do the effects of Night of the Living Dead, but like I said, he was in Vietnam. And he was a photographer, combat photographer over there, which, as he said himself in other interviews, that that gave him a lot of experience when it came to seeing the real thing when he was doing his effects. But he did not get to do the effects on Night of the Living Dead. And I don't know who did these effects. I think it was all in-house type stuff. They were all just friends and family and stuff. So, but I think for what it was effects. I think I'm going to go with a 7 on it. It'll get a little bit juicier when we get to the sequel.
The one thing that somehow I fucking failed to do that we normally do before we did what we just did is the star rating. So, Will, since this was your choice, Will, we'll start with you. What's your star rating? What are your thoughts?
On this, I'm going to go 4.25. I mean, this is one of those like movies that obviously started zombie movies, but also like there are so many things that horror movies use today that were built upon from this movie. It's a classic. You can't love zombie movies without having this as the basis. So I'm gonna go 4.25.
Donnie, what do you say?
Yeah, it's all good points. You mentioned this being among the most influential movies to not only the genre, but also I would say all filmmakers. It definitely changed the genre too. It's paced well. We mentioned the editing. It's not perfect, but it's kind of nitpicky things. I'm going to go 4 stars.
Smoke, what do you say?
Oh, you can't really gloss over how influential this movie is, and as we've already said, it started the modern zombie genre that we know it today. Without it, you would have never had Resident Evil. You would have never had Walking Dead. You would have never had the glut of zombie movies that came out. Really, after this movie, there was only a handful of movies that were influenced by this one. After Dawn of the Dead, there was like untold amount of
true
movies going forward. And then Romero himself was going to direct, I think, Resident Evil, the first Resident Evil movie. At some point, he was connected to it, and whatever reason, he didn't. For better or worse, it's probably the best, because then he went on to do his own Land of the Dead and 2 or 3 other zombie movies right beyond that. I won't say. Well, I think anybody knows this already, because we've done our own like favorite, top 5, top 10 movies. My favorite Romero zombie movie and my favorite actual horror movie of all time is Dawn of the Dead. So we'll be getting to that one at some point on the show. And that doesn't diminish the importance of Night of the Living Dead. And I'm gonna have to go with 4.5 on it for just how influential it is, how great it is. We mentioned everything: the editing, the movie, the pacing, the gore for the time period, the storyline, the unpredictable ending, all those things. I think 4.5 stars, solid.
Yeah, I'm basically going to echo what you just said. I mean, like, you're not going to find too many films that are as influential on modern horror, and obviously the zombie genre, this is the grandfather. This is where it all started as far as, like, the way it is now. Like you said, Resident Evil, Walking Dead, Night of the Living Dead, or, the remake, but Return of the Living Dead, all those, Blank of the Living Dead, I mean, everything. And it is funny, like you just mentioned, that how it's like, this came out, and then it basically took about 10 more years for Dawn of the Dead, right? Give or take a year. And then
exactly.
Yeah, 10 years. And then all of a sudden, the zombie genre just took off from there. So it was like, this is the one that kind of jump-started it, but Dawn of the Dead just took it to a new height. But yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm going to go 4.5.
4.5 too? Okay.
Yeah. This is one of the... It's one of my all-time favorites. I mean, it didn't... When we did that top 13, I can't remember whether I put it in the top 13 or not, but if it's not there, it's right there. It's like top 15, top 20. It's very high on my list of horror films, and you'd be hard-pressed to find too many that are as influential as this one, like we've said 1,000 times already. So, yeah, for those reasons alone, I'm going to go with you, go with 4.5. So, if you add them all up, the consensus score from all 4 of us, 4.31. So... there's a good chance this might, when we do our Spookshow awards in October, this might take the cake as far as that. I don't know if we'll watch another one that'll get high marks like this. So we'll find out as the year progresses. But yeah, I think this earns it and is well deserved. So pretty much that's it. I mean, you got all the usuals, and there you go. The consensus scores of 4.31 stars out of 5 for us. So that's really high marks, one of our highest rated we've ever done. So we'll leave Night of the Living Dead. We'll put it back on the shelf, put it back in its DVD slip cover and slip it back on the shelf. And we move on to next week, episode 102. We're going to be talking about the career of George Romero. Since we didn't take the deep dive today, we'll take the time to do it there. Unfortunately, he is no longer with us, but we'll take this opportunity to go through his career, his early roots, all the influential horror films that he made and everything. We'll talk about him. So we got that coming up next week. But episode 103 will be our next horror review, and this time it's my choice, and I have to pick a newer one. And now our criteria is newer is 2000 up. Anything 99 back is older. So since we have to do that, I watched this one the other day, and I was like, Jesus Christ, this is one that we have to get to here on the show, because this thing is fucking heavy metal, and it is buck fucking wild gory. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of it, from 2015. It's called Deathgasm.
I have, yes.
Yeah.
I have, yeah, it's actually on my list to watch, but yeah.
Well, bump it up to the top of the list, because this motherfucker is wild as hell.
All right.
If you're a fan of heavy metal, of course, this is going to be right up your fucking alley. Like you said, Smoke, Rocktober Blood, Trick or Treat. Put all those today and fucking turn it up to 11 and ratchet up the blood. Because here comes Deathgasm. So it is awesome. I think you guys are going to really love this movie. So it came out in 2015. It is not rated. And the brief synopsis on IMDb is: two teenage boys unwittingly summon an ancient evil entity known as the Blind One by delving into black magic while trying to escape their mundane lives. So yeah, I think this is right up you guys' alley. I think you're gonna love this one. So yeah, we're gonna have some fun in a couple weeks with Deathgasm. So everybody, I'm pretty sure it's available on Shudder, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe other various places.
Mm-hmm.
But it's definitely there. So we'll have the full list of where it's available by the time we get there, just so you have a chance to. Hold on, I'll just look it up real fast so we can kind of drop it in there real quick. Hold on.
There's a library.
Yeah, it's right there. You can just ask Smoke to borrow his DVD. Okay. Here I go. So I found it. I looked it up. I found where it's available. It is on AMC Plus, Shudder, which is kind of one and the same, really, but it is two different services, but AMC on Shudder. It's on Tubi for free if you don't feel like paying for one of those subscription services. It's on Pluto TV. It's on Peacock, Plex, Vudu, the Roku channel. And, of course, you can rent it on Prime Video or go buy the DVD or Blu-ray, whatever. So it's multiple ways to watch it, so there's no shortage, even between now and then, of ways for you to watch Deathgasm. So go check that out and then come back in 2 weeks for that. But don't forget, next week, episode 102, we're going to do a Spookshow spotlight on the life and career of Georgie Romero. So you don't want to miss that. So I guess that's it for today, guys. Anything else to add here before we check out?
Got nothing. Looking forward to 102 and 103.
Yep, there you go. We'll talk about it some more over on Deadline Horror News and the Patreon video minisodes and everything between now and then. But look forward to that. So for Will, for Donnie, the Professor Smoke, I'm Josh. We are the All American Spook Show Horror Podcast, and we will talk to you next week.
And now, folks, it's time to say goodnight. We sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Please drive home carefully and come back again soon. Good night.